welcome to the Half-Blood Report.
Here we dive deep into recent demigod news, upcoming presents books, questions only Zeus knows the answer to, and all other things Raritan. I'm Samuel, your co-host.
And I'm Diego, your other co-host.
So let's jump into the demigod news.
This is our first normal episode in a while.
Yes, it is.
We're so sorry, but also not sorry about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was getting kind of repetitive. Every week we're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a bit different. This is gonna be a special episode. But I don't know. After 3 weeks, we gave you guys 2 interviews and a whole review on the LT musical. So hopefully you guys don't hate it.
And don't forget the episode that we'll be releasing. Wait,
Silly.
that was last week, but at the time that we're recording it, it hasn't yet come out. So we hope you like the Carlos Hernandez interview. That's personally one of my favorite episodes. So yeah, if you haven't listened to that already, make sure to go do that.
Agreed. Unless like people end up hating it in the next week, and I don't know why you guys would, but demigod news.
Yeah, back on track. We're gonna just talk a little bit about the Reed Riordan articles. So
that have come out
first
in
off,
the 3 weeks since we last,
Yeah.
All right. So first off, we got an article called 5 Reasons Meg Mccaffrey is Definitely Not a Sidekick.
If you haven't already gone to the link, just go to it and so you kind of get what we're discussing about. But yeah, I really like this article, and I love the big yellow quote that they decided to pick out. It's kind of it's an interesting article. Like, it's not necessarily like telling us anything new or anything necessarily like super important, but it's
But it's a
really
fun read for anyone who has a minute on their hands. We have way too many minutes on our hands. So
it's kind of our job.
Yeah, the quote Diego's talking about says it wouldn't be fair to call Lester a sidekick either. Servant seems to be the more appropriate term, and I think that's pretty accurate.
Definitely.
Anyways,
All right.
yeah, something that does annoy me a little bit is it feels very much like an ad for the Tyrant's Tomb. Just like it's
Definitely.
Yes, and so I mean, I don't mind ads, right? I mean, like 2019, we're getting ads at us from all directions, whether or not we know it. But the thing about just about this article is it's not exactly like very like mind blowing. It doesn't tell you a lot about the book. It just, I mean, we've just said, it's a fun read. It's interesting, but it's nothing like new. So, do you agree?
Yeah, exactly. Like the line, and that's to say nothing of what she does against a super secret spoilery villain in the Tyrant's Tomb. Like, I agree with Samuel. It's a very, I don't know. It's not a bad read, but it's not a great one either.
Yes.
I feel like they could have done a lot more.
Yes, I agree. But that moves on to our next, which I think doesn't fall into this trap. This is still an advertisement.
Yeah.
But this actually is telling us something about the upcoming Rick Riordan Presents book, Race to the Sun,
Which we did do an episode on. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, be sure to do that. But Race to the Sun is something that both me and Samuel are very excited about. And we'll definitely be doing an episode after that's released. Because it's just a very exciting book. I kind of called most of these things, which I'm pretty happy about. But it just kind of lets us know about a couple of the characters, and the mythology behind them. And as you can see, like in the article, it says a lot about the characters and kind of gives a lot of spoilers.
Well, not spoilers,
Which
but definitely hints. And I think maybe Diego and I, well, we should like find time for maybe not this episode, but like in a future episode, we should try to just digest all these little hints that we get and break them
yeah,
apart more because um we did sort of talk about Navajo mythology and the Navajo mythology we thought would be in Race to the Sun. But now that they're telling us what mythology is going to be Race to the Sun, I think we should research that a bit more and talk about that a bit more in a future episode.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, so yeah, definitely give it a read. It talks about the hero twins, the rock crystal boy, the Spider Woman, the changing woman. Um, yeah, so they all look they all look pretty interesting, and I personally can't wait to read about them in Rebecca Roanhorse's new book,
Yeah.
which is coming out in
Moving on, the
it's
big
coming out
news.
in January, by the way,
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
the 14th, actually. Right. And
Yeah. Moving on to the other
the sort of big news
um
this week, I think.
yeah, big news. Camp Jupiter Classified is a journal from the point of view of Claudia, and they don't give off many hints or anything in the blurb. It's really short. It's mostly just a picture, but I'm definitely super excited for that. And it's available for pre-order if you guys want to get your hands on that. Unfortunately, it's not coming out for a while, but I'm definitely excited for that.
I do think it's actually coming out before Sal and Gabby fix the universe, so
Yeah,
that's something. I'm excited for that. It's gonna be like sort of a diary-ish thing, which I think besides the Demigod Diaries, which was only like it wasn't entirely a diary, only the Luke's chapter was a diary, but this we're getting like a full diary from the perspective of Claudia. And so
yeah, definitely.
that's something to look forward to. This is I think the first time we're getting like a real diary entry. Before we've gotten short stories, short story collections related to the books, but this is a diary of a character that wasn't really discussed as in depth as I would have liked. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So let's move on to our next section.
Yeah, Riordan review. The name is pretty self-explanatory. In this section, we review either a recent Riordan book or a reread.
And today's Riordan review is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. I've been really excited to do a review on this, and I figure by now most people have read it, um, so it won't be too spoilery. I hope. If so, just hit the link and it'll take you past the spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna insert a time for when you want to
Timestamp for that.
timestamp to
Um,
escape the spoilers.
well,
Um,
yeah.
so let's just talk about the cover
Oh, it's the cover is one of the most um gorgeous covers in
in Riordan
of
history.
all the Riordan Presents books. Yeah, written history. Um, it's just a really nice cover. It does tell you a bit about the book, not a whole lot. But the gorgeousness makes up for all of that.
Yeah, and I think it's written. The cover is illustrated by um wait um who is it illustrated by? Don't
Are
worry.
we gonna cut the
Oh yeah.
silence?
Okay.
Okay.
So it's illustrated by Eric Willikinson. I hope I said that name right. Um, and so he did a phenomenal job with Tristan Strong. It just it looks like the characters look like they could just walk right off the cover. Um, the like the Federlines look really good. Um, like sort of Tristan's gloves and the hammer and the hole in the sky is all looks really amazing, and especially the
Um,
color scheme.
and if you can also catch it, he's wearing the Dinkra bracelet on his right arm with the charm that was given to him I think that's in this picture. It's depicting the scene in chapter 5, I
Yeah,
think, where him
when
what?
they're all defending the borough.
Yeah, when they're all defending
The borough, or
the
yeah, the
patch
briar patch, that's what it's
from
called.
the Federals. So at that point in time, he only has one charm on the bracelet. But he quickly, by the end of the book, acquires a whole lot
Yeah,
more.
it's I think it's that's one of the my favorite parts about Tristan Strong. Just every time he encounters a god, the god just gives him something. It's
Yeah, which is really unlike Percy Jackson, in which your
oh
parents
oh yeah,
don't even
mostly the
care.
gods are just out to kill you in Percy Jackson, and now it's like
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a different take on like a godly
yeah,
personality.
in um
Like I had to go run to get Tristan Strong, so I left it on the computer.
all right. Yeah, I
Can we cut that?
no. um yeah, I do think that it definitely like the gods aren't always the nicest to Tristan in the book. Um it just depends. It goes from god to god. Some of them are pretty nice to him. Some of them are total jerks, such as Brer Rabbit, aka not Brer Rabbit. Um but
Spoiler alert.
but yeah, I think that it had a very sort of Dungeons and Dragony feel, where like in if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, one of the big things that players will like to do is they'll just try to accumulate as much loot as they can carry, um, and so loot eventually just becomes like the reward for doing anything. And I feel just the way that they were just he was just getting like gifts like left and right from every god he visited. That was pretty cool. And just like how everyone believed that Tristan had the power to defeat the Mafia even when he didn't believe it himself.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh so we've kind of discussed the cover and a bit the plot.
Yeah, so it starts off with Tristan going down on a road trip.
Okay,
Um
you,
he's
you
just
don't need to
lost
do a
his
step by
first.
step thing. Most people have read the book. Just
I'm not gonna do a step by step. I'll just chill, chill, chill. The book starts off with Tristan going on a road trip to his grandparents' houses, and he's just lost his first bout as a boxer. So that was like very crushing to his
and less
self-esteem.
recently he's lost his best
And we
friend in an accident.
yeah, that as well. Um so when the book starts off, he's kind of in a bad situation. And Kwame makes it very, very clear that he does not like his grandfather, because his grandfather's like always making fun of him for being not strong.
Yeah. Which when we went to go see Kwame at the launch, this was something he talked about when he gave a speech on his book about how there's lots of meaning in your name just when you straight up introduce yourself to people. And that was a theme that he really pushed in the book, in the way like there was almost a running joke when Tristan kept saying, I'm not Tristan Strong, I'm like Tristan wanna run, I'm Tristan this, I'm Tristan that. Um but then by the end, he's like, I'm Tristan Strong and I have a story to tell.
Yeah, which is by the way, one of my favorite
Yeah.
lines in the entire book, and I think a lot of people's favorite lines. But he kind of starts off in this weird position. I don't really understand how like the first couple scenes, like where he meets Gum Baby and then punches a tree. Like I get how that was kind of meant to feel rushed and kind of like in the dark. But I didn't get like any of those scenes. Like I started kind of understanding that the book had started, um, or like that he had been transported into this different world, um, when he was being chased by the skeleton ships. Um, I feel like that's kind of like the feel that Kwame was trying to get across, like the fact that it was very confusing and startling everything. Personally, as a person who has just lost a friend in what I believe was a bus crash, um, and I've just lost about. I would not go chasing after a small possessed doll through the
But the
Alabama
doll did take
wilderness.
the last thing he had to remember his friend by.
Yeah, but personally, I'm not really a fan of possessed dolls,
Okay,
so
well, Gum Baby isn't possessed, okay? You know, if Gum Baby would hear, she would smack you for calling her possessed.
she would
She
sap
she
attack.
would. Um so then he goes into the mid pass, he kind of meets these gods. So he
All right,
realizes
go.
that he needs to save mid pass, so he goes out on a quest with Chestnut, Ayana, and Gum Baby. Well, Gum Baby comes along because a quest without Gum Baby is like a
Yeah,
sandwich without sand, um,
yeah,
or
exactly,
tomatoes without toes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Gum Baby is the most important part of the entire book.
Sap attack.
Kwame, if you're listening, can we get just like a solo book on like only Gum
Yeah,
Baby?
Tristan spinoff.
Yeah, we just want Gum Baby. Like that's it.
Uh, um, and so traditional traditional like hero's journey. We won't go too much into it, but he finds out that he has the gift of Anansi, which means he's a storyteller on Anon and Sesame.
An
I just
Anansesum.
said it. And so then he goes, they have like they fight monsters, they meet gods, the run. Um
Yeah,
but
the usual deal.
what fascinated me more about this book, so in class, my teacher came up to me while I was reading Tristan Strong, and he looked at the back of the book, and he's like, "Oh, is this Black Percy Jackson?" I,
Oh Jesus!
and so, because he's my teacher, and it's like in the middle of class, and I'm like, "Yo, why is everyone looking at me?" I just kind of nodded. But the truth is, and this doesn't just apply for
It
Tristan
really is.
Strong, but all the Rick Riordan presents books, they all bring their own stories, and none of them are just Percy Jackson, but with this mythology, or Percy Jackson with that mythology. They all have their own stories, and they all have things that they have to overcome that Percy never had to overcome. And that goes with Sal and Gabby, and like sort of Sal's diabetes, and sort of Sal's loss of his mother. That goes with Zane in the Stormrunner, and he has to get over his sort of disability. That goes for Arusha, her having to um, get over that kids in her school aren't that nice to her, and that's not really going to change. Uh, Whether and just that's something that she has to accept and maybe decide is even a good thing. And so that's something that doesn't really happen to Percy. But I think the best example in the Rick Riordan Presents book so far is just Tristan Strong, because he has to deal with this loss of Eddie and the feeling that he didn't do everything he could. And that I think he almost feels that he killed his friend. Um, and that's something that Percy deals with a little bit, but in a much more, I guess that's when Percy's in the thick of battle, and someone like Charles Beckendorf or Selena Beauregard dies. Tristan has to deal with ordinary loss that ordinary people have to deal with, and that he lost his friend Eddie in an accident, and that's something he feels really bad about. And it was the sort of journey and his learning of his power to tell stories that helped him deal with this loss in his life. And I feel that was a story in Tristan Strong which was really good to tell. And I think Kwame Mbalia did a great job at not making Tristan a Black Percy Jackson. He made Tristan a its own story that deserves to be told.
Yeah, it'd be unfair to Tristan to call him a Black Percy Jackson because he really isn't. He's so different, and such a unique character. And I think Kwame really brought that across in this story. One thing that I like, y- people might disagree, but I thought that Ayana and Thandaway were basically the same character. Like, I didn't really see what characters so similar could bring to the story. Um, they both were like in the same position, and they had like the same sense of humor and the same
Okay, so
like
I disagree. I disagree. I think
ideas.
I disagree about
What?
that. So Ayana,
Okay.
um, so first of all, she's a pilot, and she kind of cares more about the people of Mid Pass, right? And so Fanduet, she's a princess warrior, and she cares a lot about her personal people. I forget what they're called, but in where they live inside the mountain, that's what she cares about. And it's sort of, I feel it's sort of like a, I feel it's almost purposely similar, and so there are differences about them, but I can see how you can consider them a bit similar, and I actually feel that was intentional because one of the big themes of the book is how um mid pass and the rest of the world, they didn't really like each other. They didn't really get along, and there were like barriers, and they just weren't friends, and they refused to help each other in this time of need when everyone needed help. And so I feel that the inclusion of these two characters who have differences about them but are at the same time similar are, it's going to, they were similar because he was showing how mid pass and alk, I remember the name alk, mid pass and alk, they were different but yet the same, and they should be getting along, like Ayana and Fandiwe were able to get along, but they weren't, and that wasn't helping them.
Well, yeah, definitely. Um, I still found them a tad bit too similar. Like, I could see, now that like you've explained it, I could see like what the idea was. I think it would have been like slightly better to like at least make them like really different. They just felt like the same kind of person. Like, it felt like if like I went to like school with them, they'd be like the same person, right?
Oof, that's
That's just
harsh.
me. They do have slight differences, but I felt that they could have been
Another factor
a tad bit more
Another factor
complimentary.
in the way that Ayana had to be healed by Tristan, and sort of the way they say goodbye. I feel Ayana was built up a lot more to be a romantic interest for Tristan in future books, while that didn't happen with Fendue.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, and so as the books go on, that may end up being one of the more major differences, or not. Who knows? Um,
Yeah, wherever Kwame decides to go with it.
yes, I
Like, most books have that the romantic aspect, but it's kind of refreshing when books don't.
do we know what Tristan Strong 2 is going to be called yet?
What? No, we don't know what the sequel is gonna be called
Oh.
yet.
I thought it was hilarious how Anansi was put inside a phone.
Yeah, yeah, it was a really big reveal. At first when
Oh, okay. Yeah, so first of all, I loved how Eddie was like, "You're talking to the wrong guy." And just no, you're talking to the wrong one, is what he said. And that was just, I was like, the whole time I was reading Tristan Strong, I'm like, "Yo, what's he talking about? Like, when are we gonna find out? What's going on?" But I feel it was actually built up so much that by the time we found out this sort of Brer Rabbit is the fake Brer Rabbit, I actually, I was disappointed. I thought it was going to be a bigger reveal. It was still like huge, and I think upon a reread, it definitely makes more sense that, but just I felt it was built up too much to just be, the Brer Rabbit thing.
Yeah, definitely. I like the reveal of Uncle C.
Oh yes, being
Um,
King Cotton.
I Yeah, yeah. I didn't get that. Some maybe other people would have gotten that reference a little bit
Well, it it
earlier.
it depends on how well
I
you paid
personally am not.
attention in history class.
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't get that reveal until it actually happened, and it was a very satisfying like ending there. I Another thing that I like felt that was a little bit I love Tristan Strong, by the way. Don't get me wrong, but another thing that I felt that was a little bit odd was the fact that everything just kind of got fixed, which kind of made it difficult because I can't see where it's going next if everything is perfect.
Mm.
Like I didn't really see anything that a loose end that didn't get
Well, I
tied
think
up.
Alk and Midpass still hadn't perfectly made up with each other,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so
Things like
they
that, but no
well they
real
kind
major plot holes were
they
left. Like the sky was fixed, the Mafo was found, King C was defeated. Um, everything kind of happened, which makes me even more curious to see what'll happen next. Because we know
okay.
so
I have a
little.
couple of things to say about that. Um, First off, a lot of things were left to be seemed fixed. Like the Midpass Alk relationship was like, oh yeah, we're gonna build a bridge and that should fix everything up. And so it seems like it's been resolved, but I feel that it doesn't necessarily mean it's been resolved, and it definitely leaves it open ended for Tristan too. And so I think I have to reread the last few chapters to just I'm sure there's probably more things like that that seem to have been resolved, but haven't entirely. Um, Second, uh, I do think there is an opportunity for Uncle C to come back. Spirits work in mysterious ways, and I'm sure he's not going to let a single bottle or a tree let him be trapped, especially the way Tristan treated him. And he did promise that he will be back, right? And but also not necessarily. I don't think Uncle C has to necessarily come back because, um, you know, so first off, depending on the book, having the same bill, depending on the series, having the same villain repetitively can either get can either be good or can be bad, right? So, um, when you look at the Percy Jackson series, the villain in every book was Luke at first glance, but Luke change the main villain, if you actually think about it, changes. In uh books 1 and 2, it's Luke. But in book 1, it's like you don't think it's Luke until the very end, and so it's actually a surprise when you find it out to be Luke. Book 2, Sea of Monsters, it is when you really give Luke a chance to be a villain, right? Then in book 3, um Luke isn't really the main villain of the Titan's Curse. The main villain of the Titan's Curse is Atlas, the Titan, right? Luke barely shows up, and when he does, he falls off a cliff. Um, but while Atlas, he like almost kills
Yep.
Percy, and so
Mm-hmm. Pops in to just yeet himself off a
yeah,
cliff.
and so then in the Battle of the Labyrinth, Luke is the villain, but he's really, really behind the scenes. And so they talk about how Luke is going to do stuff, and they talk about how Luke is going to invade the camp. But Luke,
Yeah, more in the forefront, however, is King
yeah,
Minos.
um, and also halfway through the book, we find out Luke isn't even the villain. Luke is gone. We're dealing with Kronos now, right? And so, and then in
Yeah,
book 5, Luke still isn't the villain. The villain is Kronos, right? He's Kronos in Luke's body.
yeah. And then we find out at the end that Luke is actually
So
the hero.
that is a way of Rick Riordan presenting itself to have the same villain collectively, but it's really the different,
Rick Riordan presenting himself.
but it's really a different version of Luke each time, and it just kind of stops being Luke at the end and starts being Kronos. And now I'm gonna bring in
Yeah.
another book series, and that series is the Warriors books. warriors, despite having some interesting characteristics of in the books, it's it has a problem in its main villain. The main villain of the first six books is Tiger Claw slash Tiger Star, right? Then in the next book,
What do you
it's
mean? What do you
the
mean?
main villain of the first six warrior books is Tiger Star, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, the ones before. Oh, I'm thinking of a new prophecy.
And then in the next six books, the main villain is not Tiger Star, but it's Tiger Star's son. And then
Wait, who's
I
Tiger
don't
Star's
know.
son?
It's been a while since I've read them. It's like something with an H, I think. Um,
Oh, what was it? Or like, was it the two legs? Because I feel like it was a lot more the two legs for the first three of the six.
no, because Tigers, because we still knew about Tiger Star doing some bad stuff. Like they had to like escape Ravenpaw. Okay, off topic. The point is, Tiger Star is used again and again as a villain in the Warriors books, and they use it so much that by the time that you get to like book 18, the main villain is Tiger Star coming back as a ghost and like conducting a ghost army of cats. Um, and so just having the same person they or same cat as your villain for like over and over and over is just not helpful. And so uh Rick Riordan usually does a good job of you having the same villain but changing them and sort of changing their presence to make it so that it's not the main villain. And so if we get an other Uncle C, Kwame Mbalia is a great writer, but great writers often fall into a trap of making of just reusing the same villain and not doing it well. So I feel that Kwame Mbalia can do that well, but I also think he has a lot of material to choose from when it comes to African folklore and African American folklore. So maybe not reusing Uncle C for every book in the Tristan Strong series isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I wouldn't mind seeing Uncle C
Oh,
come back, but there really is just
oh, I
so much
I know
content.
we are going to see Uncle C again. I mean, that's literally what he says. He's like, "You haven't seen the last of me, Tristan. I'm a stereotypical villain who says these things." Um, but I do think that not seeing Uncle C for like maybe a few books isn't a bad thing. I do want to see Uncle C again, and I believe we will see Uncle C again. I just want there to be, a little bit of time before we see him again. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. With that said, yeah, that's kind of our thoughts and feelings on Tristan Strong. Um, there is really a lot here. So we might cover it a little bit more in the next episodes. But I think it's time to move
Oh
on for
yeah, we
now.
have talked a lot about Tristan Strong. This is a part later. Okay. Um and
All right,
so
okay.
yeah, we've talked about Tristan Strong a lot and we have a lot more to say, but I think we'll end it there.
And that's it for this episode of the Half Blood Report. Samuel, how can I contact this podcast?
You can contact us with compliments, questions, corrections, suggestions, or anything else at thehalfbloodreport@gmail.com.
That said, it's time for credit. Our recording equipment is on loan from William Bachman.
My co-host here is Diego, and I'm Samuel.
This is the Half Blood Report podcast, the only HBR that matters. Survive till next week. Yeah, for those of you that haven't read it, um, definitely go check it out. It's off topic from our all things Riordan, but it's definitely a good book series. If you have the time to check out
Yeah.
another series.
And so maybe you shouldn't listen to Diego because what I'm about to discuss is how warriors, despite having some interesting characteristics of in the books, it's it has a problem in its main villain. The point is Tiger Star is used again and again as a villain in the Warriors books, and they use it so much that by the time that you get to like book 18, the main villain is Tiger Star coming back as a ghost and like conducting a ghost army of cats.
Yeah, so this is Samuel in the studio, and I just wanted to say that Warriors sucks!